Welcome to The Breakdown, where we delve into important topics of the day with allegiance only to reason, evidence, and a willingness to consider new ideas with an open mind. I'm your host, James Sayer. Today, we tackle the recent JK Rowling controversies. In recent months, JK Rowling, the world-famous author of Harry Potter novels and her Cormoran Strike novels under the pen name Robert Galbraith, has been strongly criticized, indeed attacked by many, and labeled as transphobic by many transgender activists and supporters for comments that she made regarding an online article about menstrual health on the internet platform DevX titled, "Creating a More Equal Post-COVID-19 World for People Who Menstruate." Rowling mocked the gender-neutral phrasing, saying, "People who menstruate? I'm sure there used to be a word for those people. Someone help me out. Wumbin? Wimpund? Wumud?" JK is basically saying, only women menstruate, so just say women. But you see, the authors of the piece were using the phrase people who menstruate because even though the vast majority of menstruators on Earth are non-transgender or cisgender women, there are also transgender men and those who identify as non-binary, meaning not entirely male or female in their gender identity, that they also menstruate. So the authors of the article were just trying to be inclusive of this small but real group of people who do menstruate but just don't identify as women. JK is essentially saying that, look, if you menstruate, you're a woman. Those who do not identify as women but menstruate find this insulting and denying the reality, identity, and legitimacy of trans people, and it impairs, in their claims, it impairs their full inclusion and acceptance within society. So many of Rowling's many of her fans, many of them trans people themselves, have now disavowed her because of these comments. So JK followed up with a lengthy defense and explanation for her comments in an article she posted on her website back in June. In her article, Ms. Rowling stated that she supports transgender people and their rights to dignity and safety, but that she's worried about the increased rate of teens transitioning as being a type of social contagion, and worried about transitioning teens in teen years too soon, and that many regret it years later. She supports encouraging teens to wait until later years to transition instead. Now, this concern seems, reasonable. However, keep in mind, 98% of those who do transition to another gender identity say they don't regret it, according to the American Psychological Association. Also, an extensive review of 72 different scholarly studies of transgender well-being done by Cornell University in 2017 found that 93% of those studies concluded that gender transitioning improved overall well-being for transgender individuals. 7% of those studies had mixed or null results, and none of the studies found that transitioning to another gender caused overall harm. Now, in her article, Rowling also voices particular concern about allowing transgender women, especially those who have not undergone sexual affirmation surgery or hormone therapy, about allowing these women into women's restrooms and facilities. Ultimately, what she seems to most fear is that some predator men will take advantage of laws that allow people to use the restroom of their gender with which they identify, or that some transgender women will use their legal right to women's facilities for perverse sexual or predatory purposes. Now, while this is a supposed theoretical possibility, and there have been extremely rare cases of male predators pretending to be women or doing so to try and gain access to women's facilities to prey on women, there are always going to be these outliers, these sort of weirdos that do these six things regardless of whether you have laws or not. But the hard data on the effects to women's safety from gender-affirming bathroom policies are clear. For example, according to the Williams Institute at UCLA Law School, which conducted a comparison of cities and towns in Massachusetts that had laws protecting transgender people's rights to use the bathroom of their identity versus similar cities and towns in Massachusetts that did not have those laws. And they found that there's no evidence whatsoever that transgender bathroom laws lead to increases in sexual assaults or increased safety risks for women, or men for that matter. Also, according to research by CNN in 2017, from the 19 states and the District of Columbia and the 200 municipalities that had laws in 2017 that allowed transgender people to access the bathroom of their identity, they found only one instance in Seattle in 2016 where a man undressed in the women's locker room, citing Washington's new anti-discrimination law. which the man made as a political statement against the new law. It was not an attempt at a sexual assault. CNN also contacted 20 law enforcement agencies within states with pro-trans bathroom laws. None of the responding agencies reported any bathroom assaults following the enactment of the new transgender anti-discrimination laws. So there's no evidence of any danger to women's safety from allowing transgender people to use the bathroom consistent with their identity. Perpetuating this myth stokes irrational fears that keeps people from supporting the right of transgender people to use the bathroom of the gender they identify with and to be able to live free from discrimination. Now, JK further inflamed her critics with the release of her new Robert Galbraith novel, Troubled Blood, where a supporting villain disguises himself as a female to prey on women. Now, she's getting 2 for 1 here by making her point through fiction and having a dig at her critics at the same time. Now, I'm confident Ms. Rowling means no harm by creating such a character and is just trying to make a statement of her own. But many trans rights activists feel strongly this helps to perpetuate a myth of transgender people as dangerous and deviant. Ms. Rowling also makes clear she's against what she sees as the defeminization of ideas concerning what have typically been considered women's issues, but now are being shared with transgender men and non-binaries. And she's a writer who's concerned about the use of words and the potential of more generic, gender-neutral, trans-inclusive language that she's worried it might dilute the focus and the power of the feminist movement. Impair their ability to realize full equality for women. Now, she's stated that she supports transgender rights, but objects to what she perceives of this dehumanization of the language around sex and gender that she sees as taking place. Basically, what she wants is, for the most part, are for women's issues to be stated as, what are mostly women's issues, to be stated as women's issues. She doesn't want the movement weakened by watered-down language. So, okay, I can see that argument from a theoretical standpoint. I don't particularly care for the phrase myself, people who menstruate, either. It could not be any more generic or lifeless. Though it is concise and nicely inclusive, it does sound odd to most people because we're used to thinking in terms for millennia that only women menstruate. So saying people who menstruate is confusing to most people. Another more enlightening way to say people who menstruate could be women, transgender men, and non-binary people who menstruate. It's clear, inclusive, and you know exactly who the menstruators are, though it is a little wordy. My criticism of the generic people who menstruate phrase aside, I do applaud the authors of the DevX article criticized by Rowling for making the effort to be respectful and inclusive as transgender people in their writing. So, yeah, I can see Ms. Rowling's concern. I can see her concern about the possibility of inclusive but somewhat generic writing weakening the force and power of words used in the feminist movement to inspire women to political action. I can see that. But there's a lot more to her objections about the use of gender-inclusive terminology than just its impact being used in the feminist movement and how that works out. In her letter, JK seemed to express sincere concern for transgender people, but she essentially believes transgender men are women and transgender women are men. She doesn't accept that if you identify as a woman, that you're a woman. She doesn't believe that if you identify as a man, that you're a man. Now, if there were any question of this, it was clearly answered when she tweeted a picture of herself in a shirt with the words, "This wish doesn't burn." She promoted this shirt and the link to the website that was selling it, a radical feminist company called Wild Women Workshop. Now, this company, what they are is they're a company with a radical feminist ideology that sells a range of feminist-themed items with an entire line, actually, of gender-critical slash what they would call gender-critical, what the trans community would call transphobic shirts. Transphobic shirts, buttons, badges, stickers, coffee mugs that use, say some pretty inflammatory things. For example, they tell you to use a four-letter word they use a four-letter word to tell you to go have sex with your pronouns. Or they say transgenderism is misogyny, or female biology is not an identity, and transgender men are my sisters. So you get the idea. They do deny the validity of like trans identity. Rowling was making this statement when she tweeted this out. She's not buying that trans people's identities are fully legitimate, and she's not going to be welcoming the trans women into the sisterhood anytime soon. And JK also appears to display a serious misunderstanding of the facts concerning transgender bathroom safety issues, and how perpetuating negative myths about men in dresses can be harmful to transgender people, and the increase in gender transitioning in teens. Make no mistake, her fears are valid fears up to a point. It's good to be concerned about whether teens are transitioning too soon. Nothing wrong with that. But keep in mind, much of that increase is due to greater availability of services, greater public awareness, and greater acceptance of transgender individuals, not some social contagion. It's good to be cautious and make sure the teen is certain about their wish to transition. But the larger and more serious issue really is, and has been, that societal, religious, and parental pressure are heavily brought to bear on trans people not to transition. There's an extremely minute chance a male predator may try and pretend to be a woman to sexually assault women in the bathroom. But the dangers to transgender and gender nonconforming people from harassment, intimidation, discrimination, and violence are very real and well established. 70% of transgender and gender nonconforming people surveyed by the Williams Institute in 2013 reported being denied access, verbally harassed, or physically assaulted in public bathrooms. 41% reported being fired for being transgender. And according to Dr. Catherine Wu at Harvard in 2016, at least 63% of transgender people experienced debilitating discrimination, incarceration, homelessness, or assault. We're talking dangers of minute probability, meaning people transitioning because of social pressure, transitioning too soon, weakening the feminist movement with too inclusive language, or accepting transgender women fully as women, and that weakening the movement, having predators take advantage of gender-affirming bathroom laws. These are small risks and small dangers versus very real and very present dangers for transgender people: being discriminated against, being verbally, physically, or sexually assaulted, being universally marginalized, disrespected, rejected. These are very real and very serious problems for the trans community. Now, properly addressing trans rights issues involves some big changes that we all need to get our heads wrapped around. But the bottom line is trans people need acceptance, inclusion, dignity, safety, respect, and freedom from discrimination, just like the rest of us. But because they are a minority, a very small minority, about 0.6% of the U.S. population, that's about 1,050,000 people, according to the World Population Review. Now, majorities, without certain constraints, they just tend to roll right over minorities without any concern whatsoever. This is why it's so important to codify transgender protections into law, to ensure that transgender people are treated as equal members of society, no longer discriminated against, abused, or marginalized, as they have been for so long, perhaps more so than any other group on earth. So perhaps you're saying, I don't get all this. Aren't transgender people just mentally ill who need psychological counseling and perhaps medication to deal with this mental disorder? Well, no. Not according to most psychologists and psychiatrists. The American Psychiatric Association changed the classification of gender identity disorder to gender identity dysphoria in 2013 because they do not believe it is a mental disorder, but a biological mismatch of their brain orientation and development with that of their assigned sex at birth that may have genetic and hormonal origins, which take place while in utero. Now, several studies, including one from the Pacific Center for Sex and Society at the University of Hawaii from 2013, have shown that identical twins are more often both transgender than fraternal twins. This indicates that there is indeed a genetic influence for gender identity. Also, transgender women tend to have more similar brain structures to cisgender women than to cisgender men. And transgender men tend to have greater similarity in their brain structure to cisgender men than to cisgender women. Numerous studies, including one by NIH from 2010, have found that transgender people appear to be born with brains more like the gender with which they identify than the one they were assigned at birth. Also, brain development is heavily influenced by the prenatal environment, especially what hormones the fetus is exposed to in its mother's uterus. For example, some scientists believe that transgender men may have been exposed to insufficient amounts of estrogen during the prenatal development. This may be the cause of gender dysphoria for at least some gender men. But many of these findings are relatively new. but they're the culmination of decades of research. But still, much about gender identity dysphoria is unknown, and much more extensive research is needed. But the overall conclusions from the scientific and medical communities are clear. Gender dysphoria appears to have genetic and biological origins. The gender orientation in the brain develops separately from the body for these people. The dysphoria is a biological condition, not a mental disorder. Transgender people are not mentally ill. They're not delusional. They're not making it up. Their identity is legit, and they are who they say they are. Okay, so perhaps you might be thinking, wait, even if gender identity dysphoria is not a mental illness, their sex is still genetically unchangeable, right? No matter what. People either have, two X chromosomes or an XY set of chromosomes. Well, mostly, yes, that's true, but not necessarily. Some males are actually born with an extra X chromosome. This is called the Klinefelter syndrome, which often results in very small gonads, low muscle mass, low muscle tone, decreased bone density, large breasts, little facial or body hair, low testosterone, and low fertility. And there are some people, about 1.7% of the population, that have bodies that are not typically male or female, or are born with sex characteristics of both sexes. And that's about 5,627,000 people in the U.S. as of 2020. Now, we refer to these people as intersex. Now, this is different. They're different from transgender people in that their condition is due to physical sex characteristics, not gender identity dysphoria. Though some do choose to become transgender, the vast majority of intersex people identify as binary, either as male or female, not transgender. Often they have had sexual reassignment done to them without their consent as infants or children. And this procedure, which has been widespread for many years, is now being aggressively challenged by the intersex community, who do not consider their condition a disorder, but part of the natural variation that nature provides in sexual differentiation. They simply want to be accepted, allowed to live as everyone else, and to have say over which sex they are assigned. For this reason, the intersex community opposes sexual assignment surgery in infants and young children and urges parents and doctors to wait until their child has made the decision to opt for surgery or not. So while an estimated 99% of people are cisgender, or traditional gender orientation, we do have this spectrum of gender diversity, as well as sex variety, the 1.7% of the population that's intersex. So, and these have existed, they do and have existed throughout human history. Now, these phenomena, they're not new, though our understanding of them certainly is still in its early childhood, if not infancy. So ultimately, while Ms. Rowling has stated that she supports trans people, she gets her facts wrong and ends up helping to perpetuate this irrational fear of men in dresses and predators disguised as women preying on women in their public bathrooms, and appears to suggest in her June letter that transgender women must have gender-affirming surgery and hormonal treatment before they can be allowed to use women's bathrooms. Now think about that. If you were a transgender person, could anything be more intrusive or repugnant? In a free society, a democratic republic, you're going to force people to have medical procedures so they can use the bathroom of the gender identity? You're going to have someone at the bathroom door asking for their official sex certification? You're going to make them use the bathroom of their assigned gender at birth, no matter how wrong that assignment may have initially been. Now, many do not want to even allow those who have had surgery and hormone therapy to use the bathroom of their gender identity. Yeah, you're really going to force these people to use the bathroom of their assigned gender at birth, no matter how much their appearance has changed since hormones and surgery. Are you really going to force some yoked up trans man with a beard to use the ladies' room? Come on, think it through. There were no dangers to allowing black people to use the same bathroom as white people. There have been no disasters from allowing homosexuals to use the same bathroom as straight people. There's been no societal problems stemming from accommodating disabled people in public spaces. All these efforts were initially met with strong resistance in the past. And there's zero evidence to support the idea that allowing transgender people to use the bathroom they want to use will lead to an increase in sexual assaults. It's just not there. Now let transgender people, just let them have what we all deserve, the right to go to the bathroom in peace. They're just trying to do their business and get out of there, just like you. Now, while JK is mistaken on some important factual points about transgender people, the error she makes appears to be made honestly, with good intentions and in good faith. She made a mistake. Hey, she's a fiction writer, not a policy analyst. But she has doubled down and appears to have no intention of apologizing. And I respect her for standing up for what she believes. It's just that her beliefs are supported by somewhat irrational fears and bad data. Some of her beliefs are mistaken, but it's her right to be wrong. Like all of ours. She's wrong, but she's not a monster. And she's not trying to hurt anyone, though she has been skeptical, if not dismissive, of trans people's identities. JK Rowling is a good writer of children's fiction and is a major philanthropist and supporter of many important causes. The preponderance of the evidence suggests that Ms. Rowling is a good woman who just has the traditional but outdated view of what it means to be a woman. And she performed, some uncritical analysis of data concerning transgender issues. Now, we recommend Ms. Rowling recheck her facts, especially regarding the sources of increase in teen gender transitioning and the whole bathroom access issue. There's nothing wrong with being concerned about these issues, but there is no credible reason to deny people the right to use the bathroom of the gender with which they identify, or to stop them from transitioning, if they so desire, based on fears that are supported by so little evidence. Hopefully, Ms. Rowling will consider her positions and issue an apology accordingly. I do think she meant well, but has just fallen prey to bad data and poor data analysis. In her mind, Ms. Rowling is fighting for women. She's fighting for truth, and she's fighting for free speech. It's just, in this fight, she chose the wrong side. Run it through the computer again, JK. See if you can get it right this time. Now keep in mind, though, JK's not alone. A lot of people feel the same way she does, or similar. Many support protecting transgender people, but they have similar concerns about kids transitioning too soon, sexual predators taking advantage of gender-inclusive bathroom laws. Others fear further disintegration of families and of traditional gender roles by accepting transgender people fully into society. Most people know woefully little about transgender issues, myself included, until about a month ago. And these are complicated topics with a lot of new science that is still in the early stages of our understanding. So, while these people may have some serious misunderstandings about transgender and gender non-conforming people, and fear dangers that are small or non-existent, it is important to understand that just because someone gets it wrong or does not understand does not mean they hate you. It doesn't mean they want to hurt you or are against you. They just have a different opinion from yours that you have yet to help them change. Now, to get the kinds of changes trans activists want adopted, a greater base of support is needed. So, transgender activists and supporters, please don't make it hard for people to convert. Most people don't know that much about transgender issues. For you to bring them over to your side, they need to understand the complicated aspects of what it means to be transgender or gender nonconforming, and the specific details of the best scientific data. Just saying according to science won't cut it. This takes some work to understand, some serious work to get your mind around. So you need to get the word out to people in small, easy to understand chunks. You need to break it down for people to understand the nature and specific challenges of being transgender. So education and clear communication are essential to get across to people how and why being transgender is a biological condition, not a psychological disorder. That identity is determined by the brain, not the body, and why it is so important that transgender people be permitted to use facilities aligned with their gender identity, simply to be able to live with dignity as they choose, without harassment, discrimination, or abuse. And just as critical, it's very important that you not put non-allied people on the defensive by making inflammatory statements. When outright hatred is displayed, certainly outrage is called for, and outrage can be great for generating attention to political causes. But when someone simply disagrees with you, maybe doesn't have all their facts straight, they're not a bad person, they're just mistaken. They just need a gentle reminder of what they overlooked. Now, some people like JK Rowling should be criticized, but not attacked, not insulted, and not threatened. That makes trans activists and allies look bad. The social punishment or canceling must fit the offense. People will back you if you protest or boycott and aggressively condemn someone that's crossed well-established social morals and boundaries. But in murky, complex areas such as transgender issues, where information is new and it's not widely disseminated and opinions are evenly divided, people are just not going to support you if they think you're attacking someone who believes something similar to what they do. This is a surefire way to galvanize your opposition and send many undecideds over to the other side. If people see you as overreacting to a mistake or disagreement, labeling people as monsters or bigots, those who simply fail to understand the full complexity of transgender and gender nonconforming issues, or who simply just have arrived at a different opinion from you, they're going to perceive you as unreasonable and unfair, and they'll be unwilling to support your cause. So much of how we get anything done in life is through politics. And this is where you build coalitions of people to support your cause. Now, you cannot do that when you are attacking your potential allies. You don't persuade people through rage or accusation, but through education, communication, and persuasive techniques. You get a whole lot further with honey than you do with vinegar. Now, finally, even if you vehemently disagree with someone, even if their command of the facts on an issue is shaky, you should never dismiss a political opponent's concerns. You may be right. They may be mistaken or even wildly wrong, and even prejudiced. Yes, all humans struggle with prejudice and bias, all of us. But dismissing someone's concerns is the best way to make sure they don't ally with you. So hear out your opponent, as difficult and distasteful as it may be, because the only way to get people to listen to you is by being willing to listen to them. Now, maybe you'll learn something about their position you didn't realize. Maybe you'll come to understand certain flaws in their reasoning, which you can politely point out. Politely. Maybe, as wrong as they are, they still have some valid points worth considering. And maybe you'll get some new ideas on how to come to a common understanding. But you'll never get there if you can't have an honest, open, and respectful conversation. Now, for a friendly suggestion regarding pronouns for the entire gender nonconforming community. Yes, I'm sure you're all just dying to hear from a cisgender male who just started learning the nitty-gritty details of the gender and sex spectra over the past month, but I and the breakdown are new allies of the gender nonconforming community, and we want you to realize your goals for inclusion, dignity, safety, and full rights as human beings. And so we offer this suggestion to help gain greater acceptance and accelerate the use of gender-affirming pronouns by Americans and the rest of the world. So currently, if you go to any number of transgender or non-binary supporting websites, there are a wide range of different pronoun sets that have been created for gender nonconforming people to use, as opposed to the binary options of he or she. The most commonly known are the them-they pronouns. The wide range of different pronouns reflects the diversity of the gender nonconforming community, but it also serves to confound and confuse everyone else. Too many pronouns, too many choices, too many different words to have to learn to fluidly adapt into a conversation. So my suggestion to speed along widespread adoption of gender nonconforming pronouns in society is to pick one. Pick one set, just one, for the entire gender nonconforming community. One that reflects you are part of the gender nonconforming community and it's easy to use and understand by everyone else. And no, it's not they-them. Use of the they-them pronoun set is both confusing and awkward, both in conversation and to read. Now, if you ask me to do it out of respect, I will. It is wrong to intentionally misgender someone or purposefully use the wrong pronoun for a person. It's a really sucky way of saying basically, screw you, I don't care how you feel, or about your identity. Though, if using the new pronoun is too difficult for you, if it's too difficult for some people, they can always just refer to transgender or non-binary person by their name. There's nothing disrespectful about that, unless they do it as some defiant protest against preferred pronouns, which is pretty jerky. But I think that the transgender non-binary communities can come up with a much better choice than them-they. That will be easier for people to understand and use. So, I humbly present to you two options for your consideration. One is that the gender nonconforming community convene a meeting of their different organizations, reflecting the spectrum of their entire community, and come to a general consensus on the one set of gender-affirming pronouns that all gender nonconforming people can use, and which everyone else can quickly understand and adopt with minimal difficulty. This pronoun will not be shared with binaries. It will be uniquely for the transgender and non-binary communities, just for them. And it'll be of their choosing. Now, everyone will know that you're gender nonconforming of some form when you use it, without you having to go about explaining any unnecessary or private details about your sex or gender identity. Now, the second suggestion is that you adopt not a pronoun per se, but a symbol, a letter actually, that denotes your membership within the gender nonconforming community. This letter is Q. It's about as simple as you get. Easy to use and arguably the best possible letter to use, as it's already strongly associated with gender nonconforming people who identify as queer, queen, genderqueer, or questioning. It makes sense and it fits. It's easy to use, and Q is just a cool letter. It always has been. It's unique, and it doesn't get used as much as most of the other letters. But it's given us such great words like question, quintessential, quandary, quality, quadruple, quagmire, qualification, quicksand, quicksilver, quick-tempered, quirky, quotidian, quotient. Think about how easy it would be to use for anyone who is gender nonconforming, non-binary, or trans, or the people with them. I'm with those two guys in Q. It's her and Q, just talking with Q. Does Q know what Q is saying? And a great campaign slogan for all those trans allies that want to show their support: I'm with Q. I can see the billboards and t-shirts now. Oh yes, it absolutely works. And it sounds pretty cool too. Come on, it does. Something for the gender nonconforming community to consider. Now I understand if you don't like it, but it is a good one. The bottom line is, pick one pronoun or symbol that is easy to use and understand, and you will see widespread usage of it adopted much faster than if you have a long list of confusing pronouns for people to have to try and figure out how to use. Now, for any of you out there who want to learn more about the transgender nonconforming communities, the challenges they face, and their perspectives, here are some recommended sources: the American Psychiatric Association, the American Psychological Association, advocate.com, transequality.org, genderspectrum.org, the Transgender Law Center, the Human Rights Campaign, Trans Lifeline, the Trevor Project, Trans Student Educational Resources, the ACLU, and many others. So that's it for this episode of The Breakdown. I hope it was enlightening and fascinating, and that you've learned some new ways to think about both the gender and sex spectra, and why it is so important for transgender and gender nonconforming people to be treated fairly, without prejudice, and with respect and understanding. And I hope you also came away with how important it is to be fair and understanding in your judgments of others with whom you do not agree, especially if you ever hope to convince them of anything. On our next episode, we'll discuss the upcoming 2020 U.S. elections. Joe Biden has a handsome lead in most national and many battleground state polls right now. It's looking good for him and the Democrats. But does he have what it takes to win in the Electoral College? Can the Democrats keep the House and retake the Senate? With Republican gerrymandering, efforts at voter suppression, voter fraud protection, and right-wing groups and the president implying the threat of violence if they don't get the results they want, and Trump and the Postmaster General attempting to hamper the U.S. Postal Service's ability to handle voting by mail, it may not be so simple. Biden's got to thread the needle of attracting enough swing voters to his side, as well as ensuring a strong, enthusiastic voter turnout from young people, minorities, and the progressive base. Can he and the Democrats pull it off? And if so, how can they do it and do so decisively? Well, we're going to talk about all that and discuss the implications of the president contracting COVID-19 on our next episode of The Breakdown. In the meantime, we wish the president and the first lady a speedy recovery, and to start taking masks, social distancing, and other COVID-19 prevention measures seriously, and to encourage their supporters now to start doing so as well. It's for the safety and health of all Americans, so it really shouldn't be that hard to do. Thank you so much for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Take care.